All right, 5. Let's get into it. 4. Here we go. 3, 2. And welcome to Perspective Shift, everybody. My name is Colby, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. And today's topic is, do I just choose my own opinions over against God's laws and biblical facts? Is this something that you have ever been accused of or ever been told that because maybe you disagree with your more conservative or evangelical sister and brethren, siblings, that then they accuse you of, it's just because you're choosing your own feelings, you're ignoring the plain biblical truth. I've been accused of this a lot lately on the YouTubes and on the Instagrams. And so as part of my larger series that I've been doing on my Substack page, I thought, hey, larger series on biblical authority. I thought, let's talk about this today. And I'm excited to bring back my little conversation with Brad. If you caught last week's show, I brought my buddy Brad on, and Brad is representative of the evangelical Christian perspective, and Brad's coming back. We're going to talk to Brad again as we dive more into this stuff on the Bible. Hey, do me a favor, if you're watching this on the Facebooks, would you go ahead and just make sure that you like my page? That'd be wonderful. And if you want to even hit that share button, I'd be super grateful. If not, that's also fine. Do what you want to do. And if you're watching on the YouTubes, would you go ahead and just subscribe to my channel as I try to build up my channel on the YouTubes, which will open up some new doors for me in that world, and that's exciting. Yes, Phil is here for some Brad. Come on now. I'm glad about that. I'm glad you're here as well. We got Connecticut in the house. Hi, Jamie. Yay, Starkovich, you're back. I'm glad. Good to see you here. Hi, Karen. Yes, it is weird. All right. Anyway, glad you're here. Welcome to Perspective Shift. Let's get into it. If you've never been with me before on a Perspective Shift, I do these every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. And what it is it's kind of the visual and auditory experience of my newsletter that I write down at colbymartin.substack.com. You can see that there. And if you go to that URL, you can subscribe to get my free weekly newsletter. It goes out every Wednesday morning, titled Perspective Shift. And I write about things like religion and spirituality and psychology and how kind of those things overlap and integrate. And then I hop on here on Facebook and YouTube Live. Guys, have you tried live video? It's way better than live video. YouTube Live. At 2 p.m. Pacific, and I do a reading of the article, and then I interact with you because you're awesome, and this helps me feel like I'm connected to people and like you're connected to me and to each other, and I like it. And once again, if you missed it, I got my green sweatshirt on today, even though it was accidental. I didn't really know that today was St. Patrick's Day, and I was just planning to wear the green. So put the green on the lights behind me just to be on theme a little bit. But yeah, welcome to Perspective Shift. So I'm going to get into it here. Oh, we got Colorado Springs. Hi, Maggie. I'm glad you're here today. I don't know if I recognized you from a previous live show. Glad you're here. So here's what I do. I go to this scene right here and I put this magical computer monitor on the screen, and I go through and I read and share the article from this morning, and I stop periodically to engage with you and your comments and any questions you might have. Just go ahead and leave them in, if you're watching on Facebook, comment section, easy. If you're watching on YouTube, comment, easy. And it all sort of shows up here, and I can see it all, such as Linda from YouTube, who says, hi from Tucson, Arizona. Hi, Linda. I lived in Arizona for 5 years. Gilbert Chandler area. Never made it down to Tucson, though. I regret that because I visited Tucson once when I was in college, stayed at a buddy's house and really liked it. And then we moved to the Phoenix suburb in like 2007 to 2012-ish and never made it down to Tucson. So anyway, but I'm glad you're here, Linda. You are welcome here. Thanks, Jesse. You're awesome too, buddy. Okay, let's get into this. So today's article is going to be a continuation. I think this is part 7 now of my series on the authority of the Bible. So if you go to my Substack page, you can catch up on all the past articles, like what is the authority of the Bible? what does it mean to be under the authority of something, different kinds of authority. I talk about how if we're going to submit to something as authoritative, then that thing needs to be good and deserving of our submission, right? That seems self-evident to me. Talked about in part 5 there, does the Bible interpret itself? This is a common move that many evangelicals make, is that how do we know the Bible's true? Because the Bible tells itself that it's true. And then last week, we had this fun conversation with Brad, who's coming back today, by the way, to talk about how this idea of picking and choosing, everybody does it. Everybody does it. So we're going to kind of keep going with that theme a little bit today as I engage with this idea of the accusation that people like myself just choose my own feelings and opinions over and against the obvious law of God, God's law, biblical facts. All right. So here we go. Let's jump into it. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns you want to drop in the comment section, I can see that here and we'll interact with it and we'll have a good time together. Sound good? All right, here we go. So I find myself increasingly annoyed at the ways in which myself and other progressive Christians like me are being misrepresented by our more conservative siblings of the faith. Actually, let me clarify that a bit. To the degree that I get annoyed at stuff like that, which on the whole is a very tiny amount, being misrepresented is one of the most common contributors to said annoyance. In other words, by and large, I don't really care what evangelicals think of me. I really don't. I can reading over and over and over again that I'm a false prophet, that I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing. Come on, get some new material, people. Or that I'm a dangerous leader of lies. Like even reading these in significant doses, which sometimes is the case, such accusations land nary a blow against my sense of well-being. But if I had to pick a particular pebble in my Christian shoe that irritates me on the reg, I'd probably go with the ways in which conservative Christians strawman me. And just real quick, summary of a straw man. A straw man is when you create in a sort of an imaginary, non-accurate representation of a person's ideas and beliefs in such an exaggerated, non-grounded in real way that you can just easily blow it over and knock it over. Like, well, yeah, of course that was easy to defeat and explain away because you built it to be explained away and it doesn't represent me. And last week we talked about the opposite of that, which is to steel man, to create an accurate representation of a person's beliefs and convictions in such a way that they'd be like, yeah, actually that represents me pretty well. So I get real annoyed, to the extent that I get annoyed, when Christians strawman me to be a person who, as one commenter posted on my Instagram this week, says that, quote, that I choose my own opinions over biblical law and facts. Or another guy on that same post who told me that I'm sinning by elevating my own opinions over the truths of God. And then there was one more guy, and they were all guys, I noticed that, all like young white guys, on that same post who said that I'm just replacing the Bible with myself as the authority. So in a nutshell, according to my anti-fans, if we're going to call them something, should the laws of God conflict with my own feelings and opinions, they say that I favor myself over God. Like I'm staring down like two tunnels, and this one is God, and this one is Colby, and their assumption, accusation is that I'm like, I choose that one. Okay, so I'll pause right there because I've reached a header, one of these large headers, obvious disregard for the law, and that's generally where I pause to see if anybody see if anybody has any thoughts so far as what we've covered, which I know hasn't been a whole lot. But I am curious, is this something that you've run into? Have you run into this suggestion / accusation that you ignore the plain teaching of the Bible, or you disregard God's laws in favor of your own feelings and preferences? Anyway, is this something that are you familiar with this? I guess is my question. Even if maybe you've never personally run into it, are you familiar with it? Hey Peter, good to see you again, buddy. I thought I was putting Peter's comment up, but Luke, good. I'm glad. I'm glad you have. I guess that's a weird way to say it, but thank you for sharing. I'm sorry that you have, and I'm glad that I'm not alone. But Peter, to your question, yes, these do get recorded. So you can, it looks like you're on Facebook. You can just go back to my Facebook page any point after these live shows. Facebook and YouTube just reprocesses them, and then they just live on in perpetuity. Oh, Jesse said that already. Well, Jesse, I host splained. I think that's a thing. Yep. So it looks like some of you all know what I'm talking about. Christine's, yes, I'm familiar. Karen, yes. Jamie, 100%. Susan, yes. Mercy, oh, I'm sorry, Mercy, you've lost dear friends over this. All the time, said Maggie. Phil, thank you for your honesty, Phil. I often ask myself whether I'm putting my own feelings above God. I think that's a great question to ask. See you later, Peter. By the way, have a good day. Okay, so it sounds like we're in the same mental space. We know what we're talking about here. So let's keep going. This section I've titled Obvious Disregard for the Law. So the assumption here, as far as I can tell, plus, as many of you know, these are assumptions that I used to hold as well. Like I was a staunch evangelical for many years, so I know this line of thinking well. As far as I can tell, the assumption behind this idea is that there exists out there, for lack of better prepositions, there exists out there objective, unchanging, and obvious divine laws prescribed by God. So you can imagine, and I'm going to get into this here in a couple weeks, engaging, because some of this has been spurred on by these YouTube videos where I sat down to have a conversation, not with Brad, I wish it was with Brad, but with a non-affirming theologian. And I talked about how many people think the Bible is like, there's this some divine document out there, like this file cabinet that God just sort of pulls out, and here's this divine document that sort of orders the world. And a lot of people in the comment section were not fans of that particular description. And they're like, yeah, there is that thing. It's called the Bible. I don't know why I gave him that voice or that tone. Maybe that's my own way of shielding myself from their criticism, is to make them sound like that. But yeah, a lot of people were none too thrilled with my sort of dismissal of the idea that there are these divine documents that outlay God. And, in that conversation, I didn't really take the opportunity or have the opportunity to explore what I meant by that. So I'll get into that here maybe in the next couple of weeks, because I think in a nutshell, what that way of thinking implies is that God is actually subservient to laws. That God is actually beholden to something larger than God, where now it's no longer God that's the highest, deepest, biggest, truest thing. It's actually these external laws, even if they're created by God. To me, the logical conclusion would be that God is then actually beholden to these laws. And I find that to be an untenable position. So anyway, the assumption here, as far as I can tell, is that there do exist these divine laws prescribed by God. And furthermore, not only do these laws exist, they are fully evident and entirely knowable as humans. So this, when people say things like you are dismissing or choosing your own opinions over God's laws, the assumption is there are laws out there that are objective and unchanging, and that we can actually know them. They're knowable by us humans. Okay, they are believed to be, these laws, so obvious, in fact, that one can even determine when another person, even if it's a stranger on the internet, is failing to abide by these laws. Hence, people making accusations that I, and it sounds like many of you in the comments as well here, are intentionally and purposely disregarding these plain, obvious, objective laws of God in favor of our own subjective personal feelings and preferences. To which I say, whew, that's heavy, man. That's a bit presumptuous. That's a heavy accusation to say that you or I are just, like I said a minute ago, staring at these two options, and one is this obvious divine law of God, and the other is our own feelings, and we're like, I choose feelings, not that. That's a serious accusation. So here's a few analogies like to illustrate what it is that people think that I and many of you, like this is what they think we do. If we were to use an analogy here, God's laws are like speed limit signs, clearly posted along the highway, impossible to miss. Look, here comes Speedy McMartin. It's me. He looks right at that 65-mile-per-hour sign, laughs and blazes past the going 85 because it feels good to go fast. Or God's laws are like a no trespassing sign on someone's private property. Look, here comes Curious LeColby. Still me in this case. He reads the sign, shrugs, and passes right by it on his way to dance a jig on the line because dancing feels good. Or finally, maybe this one is more your size. God's laws are like the IRS tax code, requiring that citizens pay a portion of their income for the betterment of society. Look, here comes Greedy Gus. Still me, I just sort of ran out of clever names for myself. He rolls his eyes every April 15th, much preferring to keep all of his hard-earned money, while also being of the opinion that Uncle Sam is just going to waste people's taxes anyway. In these three examples, like I am, by all accounts, a real jerk to live in this sort of a dismissive way. Arrogant and petulant, as the Bible might put it, full of folly. In this sort of framework, the laws are clear and evident, but there I go, just choosing my own feelings and opinions instead. I submit to you, dear reader, that if that indeed is what I am doing as it relates to these laws of God, then I guess conservative evangelical Christians are right to accuse me of replacing myself with the Bible and choosing my own opinions over God. I'm reminded of my article last week about the whole picking and choosing and how anyone who remotely tries to take the Bible seriously engages in this sort of picking and choosing. And if you missed it, I talked about how that phrase pick and choose is just kind of this slang for a more accurate description, which is applying particular principles of interpretation. In other words, what you might call picking and choosing the text I want to follow and then disregarding the ones I don't, I would call, no, I'm actually just using historical and literary context to properly understand how and if these words apply and in what way. All right. Okay. All right. I'll stop there. I'm curious how that landed with you. Those, like, do you get what I'm saying? Where if you sort of take an analogy of laws on the earth, and imagine a scenario in which a human just sort of blatantly disregards the law, which obviously happens. I'm not saying that that's absurd. Nobody would ever do that. But I'm saying that is kind of absurd to suggest that someone, again, I just take me for example, like I'm a decent guy. I know people on the internet don't know me, but I'm a decent guy who tries to live with some degree of integrity and tries to do the right thing. I was reading Thomas Merton this morning. He talks about a life well lived, where you try to reduce the amount of suffering and increase as much goodness as you can. Like, this is a life well lived, and I try to live that sort of life. So then the notion that I just look at these laws and I'm like, I see you, but I don't care about you, doing my own thing because it feels good. Yeah, I just what a strange and fascinating assumption to make. Anyway, so we're gonna talk to Brad now here as we dig into this a little bit more. Speedy McMartin, thanks, Mercy. I'm not a speedy driver. I'm a speed limit slightly over because it's California. Set that cruise control and don't have to worry about ever cops or anything, and it's safer. Linda, hi Linda from Tucson, says, can you comment on possible universal presuppositions that followers of Jesus may have, where we can begin to dialogue, for example, Christ's deity, uncaused, loving Godhead, man's fallen condition, etc. Can I comment on? Let me try to read that again to track with you here. Possible universal presuppositions. So I think what you're saying is, are there beliefs or doctrines that are present and evident within most of Christianity, regardless of sort of where you find yourself on this spectrum of like uber conservative, traditional versus more liberal and progressive. So I think you're asking, are there sort of these universal presuppositions that maybe we all hold to? And I think that yeah, a couple that come to mind are Marcus Borg talks about orienting ourselves towards God in such a way where we trust that the whole, like capital W, that the whole is good. And so for me, no matter whether you're on a real conservative or real progressive end of the spectrum, there is a fundamental belief that the being behind, within, underneath all things is a benevolent being. That it's not a demonic being that is the creator, nor is it a ambivalent being, but it is a benevolent being. That's a pretty shared value there. Now, you're going to get into some clunkiness when you start to have maybe more conservative evangelicals who say, but also along with that goodness is also this just, wrath, holy God, to which those on the more progressive end of the spectrum might be like, well, the minute you start to bring in some of those, it kind of undoes the whole good thing. Like, you know that, right? Like good, like a good God who loves all people, and then a God who burns people forever. Like at some point you have to say that the burning in hell actually is the thing that wins over against the good, loving part. Again, that's a different post for a different day, although I've started writing that one and I'm kind of excited about where it's going. Phil says, what is blatant is presuming to know the thoughts and motivations of other people. Yeah. So Phil, that's obviously a whole other part of this, is why on earth are we making such assumptions and judgments about people on the internet that we don't even know? That's an excellent point. Odette adds, conservative Christians are really sure that their perspective is the true one, but keep forgetting that it's only their perspective and not the absolute truth. Yes, that is a very common posture to have within conservative Christianity. And it's one that I possessed for many, many, many years, was that I know what's true and I have the corner on the market on truth. And if you're lucky, I will share that with you. And now over here in my more progressive days, I'm like, I mean, obviously, I think the things that I think are true, but I hold them so much more loosely. Like I realize I have been soups wrong about many things in the past. My assumption is I'm also still wrong about a lot of things now. And that I'm going to change and grow and be in different places as I go on. Jennifer, I want to say I see your comment and it's really long, so I'll try to pick it up later. Luke says, I drive like I'm 80. I kind of feel like I drive like I'm 80 sometimes too, Luke. Well said. All right. Very astute for a cat. I don't know what that is in relation to. Is that, it's because, got it, because Phil is a cat. For those on Facebook who don't see, I'll put Phil back up there. Phil is a cat. And so Colton affirms this cat's astuteness. Well done. Great. I'm going to move on to the next section here, and it's called this imaginary. Okay. It's time to talk about, time to bring Brad, not bad Brad. We don't want to make a judgment about Brad. Brad is very good. Last week we had a very helpful conversation with Brad, who represented many on the more conservative evangelical side of Christianity, the people that you and I know really well, that are part of our family and our old communities. Like Brad is sort of representative of that. And so since he was so helpful last week, I thought we'd bring him back again to keep talking about this stuff. All right. So here we go. Let's welcome to the show, everybody, Brad. Hey, Brad, welcome back. Yeah, thanks. I was a bit reluctant at first, but then I felt like you really got me last week. Like you were in my head. I have that effect on people. I'm sure you do. So, what's up, Colby? Well, I've noticed lately that you keep insisting that I reject God's laws in favor of my own feelings and opinions. Is that about right? Yeah, that's right. I'm actually the one who keeps liking all those comments on your Instagram when people accuse you of choosing your own opinions over biblical facts. I'm not going to actually write out the comment. I've got more tact than that, but I'll definitely like others when they do. I'm not actually sure how I feel about that. Anyway, can I ask you a few questions, Brad? A sort of part 2 to our conversation from last week. specifically regarding this idea that I, Colby, reject God's laws and just go with my own desires. Yeah, fire away. Awesome. Okay, let's start here. So what classifies as, quote, God's law in your mind, Brad? Easy, the Bible. Okay, see if you can narrow it down a bit for me, though. Like be specific. If you're claiming that I reject God's laws, to what are you referring? Because I can't help but notice, for instance, that shirt you're wearing. What about it? Well, it looks to me like it's a cotton poly blend, probably a 60-40 if I were to guess, which is a blatant violation of Leviticus 19:19. And Brad, that's like an actual verse in the Bible, and it's a law that supposedly God gave to Israel, and you're not following it. Well, I don't have to follow that Levitical law. Those don't apply to us today. Come on, you know this. Okay, so what you're saying, though, is that it used to be God's laws, but now they're not. And you're certain of this. Yes. Okay, what about the 10 Commandments, though? Those are clearly laws from God for humans. Are those laws that we need to follow today? Yeah, I think so. Even though they're in the Old Testament, like Leviticus? Yes. Can you then explain your actions from last Saturday? I mean, what? I mowed my lawn, did some laundry, filed my taxes. Exactly. And yet the fourth commandment explicitly says not to work. Well, okay, sure. But not like literally. What do you mean? That's just like generally speaking, like take it easy, rest. I don't know. It's just not literally don't work. Except, Brad, that's precisely how ancient Jews, the ones these commandments were given to, that's how they understood it. It was very literal for them. Just like you shall not murder, commandment number 6 was pretty literal. Stop trying to trick me. This is annoying. Brad, I'm not, truly. What I'm trying to get at is what you mean when you talk about these God's laws, because you talk as though they're so easily knowable and discernible, and yet right out the gate, we seem to be struggling to nail down how it is that we know which laws in the Bible are these God's laws. You can't just insist that I'm ignoring God's laws if you can't also then state what those laws are and how it is that you know that I'm ignoring them. Like I said, Colby, it's in the Bible. And like I said, Brad, that's a useless answer because I just named some things that were in the Bible and you found ways for them to not really technically be one of God's laws that we have to follow. Okay, well, I also could mention that the New Testament actually does repeat 9 of the 10 commandments anyway, like all of them, except for that 4th one about the Sabbath. So really, all those original laws of God do still apply, I guess, because they're repeated in the New Testament. So the fact that I was working on Saturday was fine. I wasn't violating God's laws. Okay, so then are you saying that the entire Old Testament is just out? That none of that is technically God's law anymore? I do wish you'd try and stay a bit more consistent. Are those laws not applicable anymore because they're in the Old Testament, or are they only applicable if they're also then reiterated in the New Testament? Yes? Look, it's simple, and you're making it unnecessarily complicated. The Bible is clear about what is right and wrong, and you're just choosing to disregard it if it doesn't fit with your worldview or if you feel differently about it. Except, Bradley, if I can call you Bradley, I actually don't think that's what's going on. Also, not for nothing, but why didn't you kiss me when I walked into the room today? Excuse me? Come again? Like in the New Testament, Paul writes, greet one another with a holy kiss. This is not Old Testament stuff. So why have you not done that? Are you perhaps choosing your own preferences over God's? It's not a law. And why not? That's just like Paul riffing on some local customs. Brad, can I point out something? If I say no, will that matter? Not in the slightest. Okay, so we started with the premise that you believe that there are laws of God as laid out plainly in the Bible. and that I am blatantly choosing to disregard or ignore those in favor of my own opinions and preferences. But when I tried to understand what it is for you that is, quote, God's law, and how you know that it is such, it's kind of gotten clunky. Like, some things appear on the surface to clearly be laws of God as stated in the Bible, but then you've explained them away as outdated and not for today, or as culturally bound and no longer applicable. What's your point? My point is, if it's not as clear and simple as just opening a book and reading the words on a page, then no offense to you, I'm sure you're a great guy. You seem like a great guy, Brad. Like, really, I think I'd like you if we were maybe hanging out. But why the hell should I trust your reading of these texts? Like, what makes your interpretation of them, your understanding of how and when and to whom they apply, any better than anyone else's? Look, man, relax. I'm just reading the Bible. No, stop. You're not. Stop saying that. You're not just reading the Bible. We've already established that. We've already established that you have certain principles and interpretive guidelines that you apply, which is fine. I'm not disputing that. As I said in our conversation last week, I share many of those same tools in this as you do. So we do the same thing. What I'm disputing is this. I'm disputing the notion that you know, without a doubt, what these laws of God are, these plain biblical facts are. And furthermore, that you are so certain of them that you can accuse me and many of my friends who are with me today of ignoring them. But you are ignoring them. Okay, yeah, buddy, I hear you. I understand that for you, it appears as though I'm disregarding God's laws in favor of my own feelings. But you need to hear me when I say, it's not what I'm doing. That's not how I see it. Of course it's not, because you're just deluding yourself. Brad, will you just shut up for a minute and listen? When I say that's not how I see it, I'm not just appealing to some relative postmodern mumbo jumbo where every point of view is just a view from a different point. Although, yeah, there might be some truth to that, yes, but that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is, it's freaking absurd for you to insist that I and others like me, we approach something, we come face to face with something like a law from God, and we just go, pass. And that's what you're suggesting. That's what you're insisting that I'm doing, that I'm like consciously standing before something that is true, meaning something that is of and from God. Something, and it's also something that is clearly indicative of how human beings ought to function in the world, or what we might call a law. And you're insisting that I'm just then giving that the middle finger. And I cannot tell you how freaking ludicrous that is. Well, but no, I'm not done. If you and I have different beliefs about something, Brad, different ideas about what the Bible says or what the words of the Bible mean, the reason for that is not because we're both staring at the sun and you're calling it sun, but I'm like, that's the moon. But that's what you imply with your comments about me choosing my own ideas over God's laws. If there's something that I've come to conclude is not only of divine origin, meaning it's likely as true as we can know, and if that thing is what we might call a law, then I'm going to do my damnedest to abide by it, Brad, to submit to it, to grant it authority in my life. The fact that you and I disagree on so many things is not because one of us honors and acknowledges God's law and the other doesn't. It's because we've come to different conclusions about what God's laws are. But the Bible what, Brad? As we've already established in both conversations now, the Bible requires that we interpret it, that we do more than just read the plain words on the page. As I told you, I, like you, I read and try to understand the Bible. And the fact that I have come to different conclusions than you is simply that, a situation in which two people land in two different places. But it's not, as you insist, illustrative of me choosing my own feelings and opinions over and against God's laws. So when you wear that shirt, Brad, or when you mow your lawn on Saturday, I don't creep onto your Instagram and accuse you of ignoring plain biblical facts. I assume and I trust that you've concluded that the verse is about mixing fabrics and the commandments about not working on Sabbath, I assume that you've concluded that those are not in the category of God's laws that you need to follow. Why you can't extend me the same courtesy is beyond me. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I guess I do that, huh? I mean, I know that I have all sorts of really good reasons why I, disregard some of the commands of the Bible, and I know that none of them are because I just don't care what God has to say. I see how they come from a place of really trying to understand what it is I'm reading and how it applies to today. So I guess I don't know why I struggle to trust that you're doing the same sorts of things. It's okay, man. I get it. I used to struggle with that too. Like, your religious heritage, which was also my religious heritage, has taught you that there is only one true way to read and understand the Bible. And they've also said, hey, lucky for us, we figured it out. So you've been told all your life that how you read and understand the Bible is the right way and everyone else is wrong. I mean, that's a really stressful way to go through the world, though, isn't it? Yeah, kind of is. It makes you do things like leave ignorant sounding comments on people's YouTube or Instagram, or just liking the comments of those that do. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. No, it's all good. Seriously, like I said, I get it. So how about this? How about moving forward? If you find yourself feeling or thinking something like, there's Colby or whomever, just ignoring God's laws, ignoring obvious biblical facts and choosing their own feelings, maybe next time you can notice that impulse, you can choose to just get curious about it. Like, feel free to ask me or ask others, why is it that we've landed on the beliefs that we have? How is it that we came to that conclusion? Maybe, Brad, start with openness and curiosity instead of judgment and assumptions. Yeah. I suppose I can try that. Sweet. And I will too. I'll try, because this is stuff that I'm still working on too, man. Thanks so much, bud. Hey, you bet. And thank you, Brad. It was really cool of you to come back on. Maybe we can do it again sometime? Maybe, but I might need it. Might need a minute. No. Totally makes sense. All right. See ya, bud. Bye. Oh, Brad. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your honesty at the end there. That was really cool to sort of see you have this moment of self-reflection. I'll have to confess that that's not often the response that I have when I talk with other people, but it was really cool, Brad, to sort of see you model that. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm going to now check out some of the comments here and just see what you guys thought about my conversation with Brad. If you had any questions or comments about that, if you recognized any of the interactions or the back and forths. Mandy, doesn't matter that you're late. A wizard is never late, nor are they early. They arrive precisely as they mean to. So you're just a wizard, Mandy. All right. Oh, I didn't mean to call you out, Jennifer. No, I was just saying I will check it. I wanted you to know that I will read your comments later. Linda Martino says, then truth is relative. This is a really good question. I'm reminded of Pontius Pilate asking Jesus, what is truth? And I'm not saying that Pontius Pilate is like the best guy to quote, but I think that sentiment, what is truth, is something that humans have been ardently and earnestly seeking for as long as we've been walking the earth. So if you ask me, is truth relative? I would say that I believe that at the heart of everything that is, that there has to be some ground of objective reality and capital T truth. So I am not a relativist in the sense that saying that all truth is relative. So I do believe that there is an objective ground of reality. But what I'm less convinced of is you and mine, not you personally, Linda, just our capacity to know that truth, and understand that. So what I try to hold loosely is the awareness that we all might have some parts of what we think that are kind of true and kind of not true. We all have this sort of, we're all this cocktail of both. And I don't really know how how it would make sense to operate any other way, because I look at my own life and I have periods of my life where I would have sold the farm had I owned a farm, with the conviction that what I believed was absolutely true. And now I look back and I'm like, that is not true. So what do I do about that? What do I do about the fact that that has happened repeatedly in my life? And I imagine you as well, Linda, if you thought about your own life, you could track some of those same super true, fast forward, okay, maybe less true than I thought. All I can conclude is that I am probably going to continue to have that experience in life. I don't think that now that I'm 38 years old that I have finished with those experiences and now I can trust that all the things that I think are true are true. So I don't know. Is truth relative? No. Is our perception and our capacity to fully grasp that truth in all of its entirety, is that subjective to factors that make it so that we can't ever really 100% latch onto it? Yes, I do think so. So that's why I try to present myself as loosely holding onto my ideas as possible. Jesse seems to think that Brad and I shop at the same places. It's now the second time they've worn the same thing. Hey, look, if Brad has quality taste, I can't fault the guy for that. Good, Mercy. I'm glad you love Brad and Colby conversations. I've found them helpful as well, honestly, to write them out and to even share them with you all. So who knows? Brad might be a semi-regular on the on the show. Mandy, can't imagine Colby writing this all to himself. It's awesome and funny all at the same time. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one that enjoys these sorts of things. Yeah, I like this. Phil's bringing in some Bible. Romans 14. Who are you to condemn someone else's servants? Their own master will judge them whether they stand or fall. With the Lord's help, they will stand and receive his approval. Oh, so Colton, I like your response to Linda. That's kind of what I was stumbling over too, but you said it really nicely here. Whether truth is or isn't relative, it isn't. We never really know if our understanding is correct or appropriate. How often do I get comments like this? Is it like every day? It's not every day. It kind of comes and goes in waves. So those two YouTube videos, the part 1 and part 2 of my conversation with Owen Straken. Sorry, Owen. Those have created fresh waves of these sorts of commenters. So I would say on average, it's a couple a week, and more or less, I just sort of ignore them. And the ones that have some degree of earnestness to them, like I sense some sincerity in their comment, I'll actually maybe engage with or answer their questions, but most of the time I just ignore them. But it did cause me about last month to reevaluate my social media consumption style and realize that I want to still keep my page and my work public and knowable and all that, but I do want to curate more tightly who's in my own feed, especially on Instagram. So I went through on Instagram and unfollowed, which sounds super negative in our culture. Unfollow somebody. It's like you did something wrong, unfollow. No, it's more like I don't actually know you in person, and I don't know how it is we met in real life if we did at all. So I'm going to limit the people that are in my life directly in my Instagram feed to just the people that I know personally. But anyway, I don't get a ton of comments like that every day. Brad Godbone. But isn't he a good sport? He's a good sport about it. Andrew, what's up, buddy? Good to have you. Wouldn't it be important to acknowledge that not all laws are created equal? Moral laws, ritual, purity, civil justice, and sacred time. Yeah. I don't dispute. So if you're talking about just like Leviticus or maybe just Old Testament in general, that there were different. Let me back that up. My understanding is that the categories, especially in Leviticus, where you have like the moral code and the rites and rituals code, my understanding, and I could be wrong about this because it's been a while, is that those are divisions and categories and distinctions that later scholars and or rabbis and or scribes have assigned to it, that those aren't necessarily embedded in the text. So what we might today call moral law versus ritual law is not my understanding is not a distinction, for instance, that your average ancient Jewish family would have made. We make those distinctions now. Maybe we do it out of convenience. Maybe we do it because it's hard for us to sort of reconcile all of this. And so that's where we say, well, the moral laws are always applicable, but the ritual ones are not. Those come and go. But I actually, again, this is just my recollection, and I could be wrong about that, is that sort of categorical distinction was not original to the ancient Jewish law. They were just all in the category of, here's the Torah, follow it all. Yes, Luke, I was also Brad one time. I mean, isn't that, what a gift to be able to name that in ourselves. Or I should say, it's been a gift for me to create this character, Brad, and know that I can write Brad pretty well because I was Brad for so many years. And, give me another 10 years and the current version of Colby will be a different character, Chad. Go from Brad to Chad. But I think there's a lot of, it's been really helpful for me to be able to reflect on that. Phil says, I hope and pray that Brad comes to his senses. He seems like he has a really good heart. I was picking up on that too. Good heart. He's just sort of spouting a lot of things that he's heard and hasn't necessarily thought much about. Yeah, Melanie adds, but my pastor always says, part of the difficulty in these conversations is even being able to start one. Yeah, and that is, in sort of the evangelical complex, the goal is to just get people to think and believe the right things and to not question that. And so one of the pastor's job is to just teach the right answers to the questions. But I was a bigger jerk than Brad. I was a bigger jerk than Brad too. This version of Brad is sort of a hybrid of my old self and how I wish more Brads would respond. Fred asks, how do you keep from being defensive? I came to a similar approach to the Bible as you over the last 10 years. How do I keep from being defensive? I actually am by nature a very defensive person, and I still get very defensive. I think I'm getting better at it. But I will not lead you astray, Fred Freeman. I may put on airs in my writing and in my public work that presents me as a non-defensive person. But it's still there. It's still in me. Some things that have helped me, I think, find some growth in this specific area are things like remembering that I used to be Brad. So that gives me great compassion. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about how understanding leads to compassion and compassion leads to love. So when I'm interacting with people who do really activate this sense of frustration in me, if I can remember that I can actually understand where you're coming from. I get it because I used to think that way. That leads to compassion, which is like, oh yeah, so that of course you would respond that way, which leads to love, and then you can have that sort of non-defensive posture. So I think that has helped me a lot. It's just to try to remember that I used to be that person too, and then also to add on to that, helps me be less defensive is to understand that to choose to live in such a way where I believe that everyone is doing the best they can. Everybody is doing the best they can with what they have. Now, is that always true all the time? No. But does it behoove me to live that way and to act as though that's true? Abso-freaking-lutely it does. So I just choose to believe. I hand out benefit of the doubt like it's freaking candy on Halloween. Like, I assume you have good intentions. I assume your heart is in the best place. I assume your wife is pregnant or giving birth to a child right now, and that's why you cut me off on the freeway. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Karen, for affirming my conclusion earlier, is that I'm going to continue to have the experience of realizing that what I thought was true is now less true. Andrew, I actually considered inviting a real human onto the show to be Brad for this conversation. And yes, they would steer the conversation differently. Obviously, you know that, I know that. Everybody would have a different response to it. I intentionally steered it the way I wanted to steer it because I had some points I wanted to make. But yeah, Melissa affirms my choice to unfollow for self-care. Yeah, Double D. What's up, Double D? I don't recognize you. I'm glad you're here. When is truth ever not biased by sentient persons? It probably isn't. So I guess we can just name that. It's almost always going to be biased. And I think also then continue to work to get as close to an unbiased as we can. I still think it's worth I'm not saying you don't think this, but I still think it's worth the effort to try and get close to that ultimate reality that I referenced earlier. I'm going to probably pass on that, but Andrew, you can take her up on it. Yeah, I know. Brad is a little bit more of a good sport than many of the people we engage with. But I'm all right with that. Yeah. At one point you even thought Brad was hellbound. Damn, Colton, you must have been in a place. All right. I have to deal with Brad's daily. Sorry, Odette. Defensive 3, solidarity fist bump. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Mercy. I try. Yes, people absolutely respond in fear. Refond is just a combination of responding in fear. People refond because you're challenging their internal moral code. Yeah, and that's a scary thing to challenge. Oh man, I'm trying to get all these comments here. Okay. It is 2:56 and I try to keep these things within the 60-minute mark. So I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you for being with me today. If you haven't done it yet, I'd invite you to like my page on the Facebooks. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Although my suspicion is that most of you that join me already do these things. But hey, there are some of you who catch me for the first time each week, and I'd love to have you be a part of this show as well. And then you can, again, always go to this URL here to get my weekly newsletter delivered into your inbox. And I'm probably going to stay on this authority of the Bible for at least a couple more weeks because I have more thoughts on it. It's just fascinating to me. I was talking with my buddy Josh Scott, who's the lead pastor of Grace Point Church in Nashville, Tennessee. And both of us, independently of each other over the last 2 months, have kind of been really hyper-focused on this topic of progressive Christianity and the Bible. And I was reminded this week of Liz Gilbert's, the way she describes ideas in her book, Big Magic, where ideas are like these muses that sort of drop at the same time in different people around the world. And I feel like the idea muse of Bible and progressive Christianity sort of fell on Josh and myself at very similar times. So if you haven't checked out his stuff, he also has a Substack page, which is super dope. Josh Scott is doing some great stuff on the Bible as well. So if you are even more curious about what I provided, you can add to that. All right. Thank you, Mandy. It's good to see you. All right, and it's your birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mandy. Happy birthday to you. It's awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Bill Pitts. Good to have you here, buddy. This is awesome. You guys make my Wednesdays delightful. And then once again, one more just big thanks to Brad for joining the show. Hopefully we'll see him again sometime in the future. All right, peace. This week's episode of Perspective Shift, I'm going to now invite you to do one of 3 things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.